Welcome to the Rise Network podcast show, a podcast dedicated to help you reach your dream lifestyle through investing in real estate. We're going to be sitting down with new, intermediate, and experienced investors to talk all about real estate and how it has changed their lives. If you're looking to scale your portfolio or even just get into real estate investing, you're in the right place. Make sure to tune in. Hello, everyone. You are listening to the Rise Real Estate Investing Podcast with your hosts, Austin Ye and
Mayu for the second time today, guys, because Austin forgot to record the first.
This is not my fault. I'm usually never responsible for recording.
You've been responsible for recording for like the last month now.
Last like 3 or 4 episodes. Yeah. And how many times did I mess up? I messed up half of those times, so a lesson should have been learned.
Awesome. What's going on with you? I know you.
We already went into it, but I guess I'll just chime into the audience. But I was in this is a very passionate, sensitive topic to me. But I am very infuriated because infuriated. English is not my go-to subject, but I was pissed off because I got an appraisal back on a property. So we bought this property on private money. And we were looking to transfer it over to our credit union now, right? So like with the regular lender, traditional lender. And what we realized is that we got screwed over in our appraisal by $60K. This is the only appraiser that had time to work with us. I spent the entire day calling appraisers. And a lot of the reasons didn't really make sense. So we came back at 240. We wanted 300. And I know you don't always get what you want, but this was like substantially off. And I asked Desjardins for the report, and Desjardins able to send it to their client. So I was taking a look through it, and the appraiser was definitely out of pocket with a lot of his comps. For one, we have a legal duplex. He comped it against an illegal duplex. An illegal duplex, which we all should know, like any competent investor, realtor, someone who has common sense would know that a duplex that is double the square feet, it's literally double the square feet of a single family home should be worth more than that single family home. And his reason, when I called that out, his reasoning behind it is that, I spoke to a realtor there, which I really don't know if he did. They said that the single family with an illegal unit should be more valuable because it's easier for a family to live in or something. And I was just like, okay.
I think as investors, we value the duplex more, but I can kind of see what he's saying. I don't think it should be.
I see what he's saying, but it's not true, right? Yeah. Like ultimately, like it's not true. He's reaching, I don't think he realized there's an illegal duplex. I think he just had to cover his ass and not seem stupid, right? So it is what it is. And what else? So on this city, there's two areas. There's one on one side of the bridge and another on another side of the bridge. We're on the good side of the bridge. That is like a 3 or 4 minute walk to a hospital, right? So great area. And he comped it to properties that were on the other side of the bridge that was not as a great area. And I called that out, basically saying our area is more superior. And just to layer on top of that, I had also pulled all of the data, all properties that sold within 180 days within a 5-minute walk from our subject property. Everything was within a 5-minute walk. All of the properties. There were 9 transactions. Average home price was $310K. All single family homes because there's not really much duplexes selling here. Highest price was $500K. Lowest price was $213K for like an 800 square feet crappy property, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. $213K, and it was crappy condition too, right? And ours appraised for $240. So there's obviously something that didn't make sense there, and I called that out as well. And he basically rebutted by saying, Austin, why don't you just do the appraisal yourself? I'll give you a blank form, you fill it out, you give it to me and sign it. He was pissed, right? And I was like, okay, like this guy, like there's no hope in me trying to bring up the appraisal at this point, right? So yeah, I mean, there was a bit of back and forth as to what made sense. And he basically said that, I don't know, like he was just like, if I appraise this thing 80K higher than what you're looking for, would you have said anything? I was like, what does this have to do with the conversation? This has nothing to do with anything. I'm just speaking facts, rational data, and you're just not rebuttaling anything. But nonetheless, what we're going to do is we're probably going to finance it anyways with this appraisal and work on getting another appraisal report to try to get it in time. Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Yeah. So if you do that first refinance with Desjardins, are you then going to go back to Desjardins again in like 3 months and refinance it again? Or are you guys at 240, are you still pulling out what you need to pull out?
No, we're not pulling out what we need to pull out. There's going to be some money tied in there, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not happy with that, especially given that like this is worse than worse. This is like this could have been avoided, but not really at the same time. It's just it's on the onus of the appraiser, right? So we're gonna do that. We're gonna get another appraisal. I know banks hold the appraisal down for 3 to 6 months, like 3 months. They still consider it valid. So hoping to refinance in 3 months if we get a higher appraisal.
Cool. All right, man. So I'm gonna keep my part short. I think initially the first time we did it, we had a longer preamble, but I gotta jump on a call soon anyway. So the one thing I'm gonna say right now is I'm actually looking, because I just realized this would be a good thing to bring up here. But I'm actually looking for ghostwriters, right? To kind of, I've got like all these like blog topics and things like that in my head that like I keep writing down and thinking I'm gonna like write these like crazy long blog posts, but it takes me forever. So I'm looking to hire a ghostwriter. If anyone that listens to this podcast is a ghostwriter or interested in writing about real estate and financing related topics, shoot me a DM on Instagram and let's hop on a call. Other than that, Austin, why don't we introduce everyone to Adam Shoji?
Yeah, so Adam Shoji, he's a new real estate investor. He's been in the game less than a year, but has a super inspirational story and something that a lot of newer investors can relate to. If you don't come from a real estate background, you're going to relate to this guy because he came from the music industry, like didn't know the numbers portion or rental portion, anything really. And he was able to pick up on all of that stuff and ended up buying his first property. So this is all about really diving down on what it takes to be a new investor, the struggles of a new investor, and the steps and procedures you need to take to overcome your obstacle. I know that you guys would absolutely enjoy this episode. Even if you're an experienced investor, you'll still relate to or reminisce back in the day of how it was getting started in investing. And before we get started, if you like the podcast, like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can to support it. Leave it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts because we want to hit 100 reviews by the end of the year. And without further ado, we're going to jump into the podcast episode with Adam. Hello, everyone. We are joined with our very special guest, Adam Shoji. Adam, how's it going, man?
Hey, guys. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Adam, so myself and Austin know you pretty well through a couple of different things at this point, but why don't you tell our guests or our listeners a little bit about you and how you kind of got started and what you were actually, what you were doing before you got into real estate. Because I think
you have a pretty interesting background that I think you're the only person I know within this industry that you're going to get into.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. So before I got started in real estate, I was and still am working in the live music industry as a tour manager and also playing in a band as a musician. So pretty much I started out touring in my own band and, kind of grinding it out, sleeping in a van in Walmart parking lots, touring the US and around the world, and then I kind of got to a point where I feel like I reached a plateau in what we were doing and sort of pivoted into tour management. And because I had been tour managing my own band just to like save money, skills kind of came naturally to me. And from there, I was able to start, working on some bigger tours and doing shows at a much bigger scale. So pretty much right before COVID, I got a new job working for another artist.
Are you able to give names?
Yeah. So I work for a pop artist called Black Bear.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of just got thrown into that tour. Right before that got that job was I was working for this band called Neck Deep, and we were on tour with I don't want to name drop too much, but basically we were on tour and he just said a buddy of mine who's a photographer for Neck Deep also was working with Black Bear, and he just said, hey, I think Black Bear needs a tour manager. Do you want me to put your name in the mix? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And kind of jumped on a call with management. And then he said, all right, 6 days later, I got on a plane to Norway and just kind of got thrown into it. And that tour was an absolute disaster, but, made it through with pretty much no preparation whatsoever. And from there, they offered me the gig full time. So we had a pretty big year planned out for 2020. I was going to be on the road for pretty much the whole year. And I was also going to be making more money than I had ever seen in my life, honestly. And the plan from that was going to be, buy a single family home in Toronto and settle down a primary residence. That was my goal. But then when COVID happened, pretty much had 1 week of work, and we were just gearing up to start tour in April, from pretty much April till the end of the year. And just like everything shut down, just completely lost. Everyone in the music industry lost their jobs for the most part.
Yeah.
And that kind of just left me like completely and utterly like, I had no idea what I was going to do. I was just like, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do now? Basically.
Because
So
you
that's
just got
pretty
this
much-
job, right? Like, and you're like, oh, I'm set. And then now it's taken away from you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of spent a lot of time feeling sorry for myself for a little while there. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was like, what am I going to do now? So luckily I had, a decent amount of savings that I could live off of for the time being, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And I started dabbling in stocks a little bit because, my uncle, obviously with the stock market crashing, I had my money in mutual funds, and I started freaking out when I saw it tanking right when the market crashed. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? I'm just losing money. And I was not financially literate whatsoever. But yeah, from there, I kind of used that as kind of a way to sort of try and start learning stocks, and lost a lot of money doing that.
When were you buying? At what period?
I was buying in small increments. Like I think I bought like $5,000 of the CIBC stock when it was at like $85 a share. And like looking back, I'm like, oh, I should have just piled all my money into that. But so I was buying, little bits here and there. I talked to my uncle, who's a financial advisor, and he gave me some good tips, but I was kind of too scared to go full in on it. And I sort of missed that window of opportunity once the market had started to bounce back. And then, I was just speculating essentially. And, when you speculate, you're gambling. And so, yeah, I lost a decent amount of money and ended up making most of it back based on speculative bets in the stock market. But I was just like, once I made it back, I was just like, I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Like this, I kind of in over my head. And I feel like, it really goes to show that the risk that is involved when you are trying to invest, but you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't think I guess like trading stocks is probably the best way to have income if that's your only income source. And let's say you have less than 6 figures saved up. Yeah, that's probably pretty risky, right? Because you need to live off of that money as well.
Yeah, it was stupid. It was stupid, but I learned a lot from it, and I learned my risk tolerance a little bit more. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started there, and then how I got started in real estate. I would have been. I swear to God, it's because of you. I was scrolling the stocks app every morning. I would just wake up on my phone and scroll the stocks app, and there's always these little news articles at the bottom of it, and that your Toronto Life article was on there, and it was like, here's how I'm 25 years old.
I'm the biggest smile right now.
Yeah, not to inflate your ego too much here, but yeah, I was reading it and I was like, 25 years old, I own 25 rental properties here, and I was like, sorry, can I swear?
Yeah.
I was like, how the fuck did this guy do this? Like, if he could do this, then I could do it. And I was reading an article how you had like 40K, and then you just bought a single family, bird it, and leveled up. And I didn't know what any of that stuff meant at the time, but that was what like caught my attention. And I was like, okay, wow, this makes more sense to me. I need to start learning more about this. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's awesome, man. So a lot of people would have saw that article and be like, oh, just fuck off. Well, most people did see the article and was like that. But clearly we see an example of someone who's taken action. So that's amazing.
That was October, November 2020. Where do you go from there? Because like, okay, you read the article, like Austin was just saying, like 99% of the people read the article and they go, oh shit, like he got lucky, whatever. And then you just kind of leave it at that and just move on with your day, right? So,
and it's especially people in a rock and a hard place where, like someone who has lost their job, I don't think they would see too favorably an article like that. So props to you.
Because you're saying that too. I swear, because I follow so many people in the music industry, and there were just so many people in this negative mindset that's just like, oh, when is this going to end? Like, when are things going to go back to normal? Just kind of feeling sorry for themselves. And honestly, I was sort of in that place for a little bit, but I saw that and I was literally like, damn, like if this kid can do this with 40 grand, then I could do this for sure. And so from there, I started educating myself. I started listening to the Rise podcast. I started, picking up bits from other podcasts here and there. Bigger Pockets was a big one for me. and reading books, it was big as well. I started reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and the book on investing in rental properties and just educating myself. But from there, I feel like there's just so much information out there that it's kind of overwhelming a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really, I was getting a little bit overwhelmed. I was just like, oh, there's so many different ways. I could do Airbnb, or I could do the BRRRR strategy, or I could make money house flipping, or I could, there's so many different ways. I could do house hacking, and I was having trouble. I kind of had shiny object syndrome. I was just like chasing every little thing, and I didn't really know where to go from there. So from there, I realized I followed a lot of different investors that you guys had recommended and people in the Ontario real estate community. And I noticed a lot of the people I was following were coached by Corey McKinnon. And I knew nothing about Corey McKinnon, but I just said, I think it was Alvin Wong I had a conversation with, and he reached out to me back in November, I think, or maybe December. And he was just like, man, like, because he started coaching with no properties. And I kind of had the mindset that I was like, I shouldn't be hiring a coach. I don't know what I'm doing. I have no properties, but I think a lot of the advice that I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I think the advice that a lot of people were giving for new investors that have limited capital or just starting out is spend 10 grand on a coach and get coaching. Like, because I think so many people don't know where to start. And I think a lot of people view that as a $10,000 expense or whatever the cost is. And they're not realizing that it's an investment in yourself and how you can leverage that to accelerate your growth. So I reached out to Corey and Discovery Call, and I kind of jumped into the coaching program right off the hop with no experience whatsoever. And that's kind of how I got to.
What's the timeline like, right? So you read the article November-ish, and then, you spent November, December. I think it sounds like you got connected with some other investors and you were like networking and stuff like that while digesting Bigger Pockets podcast, Rise podcast, a couple other like online, like kind of influencers and stuff like that. How long were you doing that for before you jumped into a coaching program?
Probably about, I would say 2 months or so. I think I really started getting obsessed with real estate in right at the beginning of November in 2020. And I was just constantly consuming, constantly learning, podcasts, audiobooks, YouTube videos for about, I would say about maybe a month and a half to 2 months until I decided to pull the trigger on coaching. And I was just like, I got to do this now, because every day that I wait is opportunity cost, right? I'm losing opportunities to get into the market now. So it took about 2 months there, and I started the program in January of this year.
That's honestly not bad, because I mean, like I talked to so many people that would be like just researching, watching YouTube videos, Googling, like just looking at realtor.ca. If you look at like 10 different markets, you can spend like a day on every single market. You can spend like 10 weeks, just goes by, right? So 2 months honestly isn't bad, but so what did you do after that? So you join a coaching program. I'm sure it doesn't really solve anything, right? You get a coach, but now what do you do?
No, just to go back a little bit to what you're saying is, I think for me, one thing that I had on my side, or that I was working in my advantage, was I was unemployed. I didn't have a job. So I had so much time on my hands. So I was just basically consuming and educating myself on real estate like a 24/7 pretty much, or not 24/7, but like as if it was my job essentially. So I think that is maybe why I kind of jumped right into it. And I saw this time off as an opportunity to learn a new skill and learn about real estate, as opposed to just sitting around feeling sorry for myself, waiting for the grass to grow and COVID to end, basically. But to go back to your question from there, so January was when I started in Corey's program, and we did a lot of, from there, like the next month or two is a lot of focus on mindset and really kind of training my mindset, him and Riley training my mindset to be in the right place. And so I spent a lot of time just working on personal development, and I realized that a lot of this stuff that I was learning, I could kind of translate into every aspect of life and not just real estate.
So let me stop you there for a quick minute. So I want to talk a bit about that mindset as a new investor, right? Because we tend to skim over this. But now that we do have someone who's just recently purchased their first property, a couple months ago, what were your thoughts? Like, not what were your thoughts? What was going in your mind, like limiting beliefs or things that hindered you from getting into the market? Now, since we're speaking about that topic.
And I guess another way of looking at it is, what did you work on the most in like that first month?
Mm-hmm.
In that first month, yeah, that was so January. Yeah. Well, one of the big things that hindered me, I think, was my surroundings. None of my friends were doing this, and no one seemed to think it was possible. When I had started educating myself more, and I remember I sat down at the dinner table with my dad and my stepmom, and I said, yeah, I'm going to start investing in real estate, and I'm going to be retired by the time I'm 40. And my stepmom literally laughed in my face. She's just like, yeah, okay, Adam, everyone wants to be rich. Yeah. Okay. Good luck with that. And I was just like, no, I'm going to, just so you know. And from that moment, they got a lot more supportive, obviously, but it's just like, that's like what's ingrained in their minds. Right. And that's the mindset that is being projected on me too. And that's the mindset that I kind of had before too, is like, well, it's kind of shifting your mindset from, I can't afford that. Like, oh, I have so many friends that are like thinking about wish they could buy houses in Toronto. And they're like, oh yeah, that would be incredible, but that'll never happen. And it's just like, well, when you think like that, then yeah, you're never going to be able to afford it if you feel like you can, if you think you can afford it. But once you start to think about, instead of saying I can't afford it and switching your mindset to how can I afford that, then you can kind of reverse engineer everything back into place and figure out the steps you need to take to achieve that goal.
Even now, like, I think like a week or two ago, I can't remember who I was talking to. I was just like, look, guys, like, I'm just going to work hard for the next like 5 years. I'm just going to make as much money as I can. And then I'm done. Like, I'm just like, that's the entire objective, right? Just make as much money as you can now. And then you, in theory, don't have to work again later. And they're just like, hit my ass, right? And it's like, yeah, sure. Like, if you come from a mentality where like you're on a salary job, you get a slow, consistent pay increase, right? And you give into the lifestyle erosion part of it, right? As your salary keeps going up, you'll have to keep working, and it is what it is, right? But I think as you surround yourself with other investors and people that are just doing like big shit, right? You just go, oh, like anything's like possible. Like none of us are any different from each other, right? Just like different circumstances, different times, and like it's just all hard work, right?
And you just got to ask the right questions, right? Like that's definitely true. Like when you surround yourself with people who are not into it, they will shut you down immediately. Like someone, like prime example is, I can't afford a place in Toronto. If you ask yourself, how could I afford a place in Toronto? You start talking to people who have afforded a place in Toronto. It's like, what? Like, where do you work? What industry where do I need to work to get to be able to afford a place? Like, oh, I don't work. I'm an entrepreneur. Oh shit. Like, how did you get in your business? Right. Like, you start opening your mind and start actually solving for the problem. Imagine like someone gets murdered and you're like, oh, I'm not, like, we don't know who did it. That's it. Right. No, investigators ask the right question, dig back, and then figure out like a solution to the case. That's exactly what it is with anything like outside of just like real estate. So definitely see how it's applicable in other places in life as well. So mindset obviously was a big thing that you were focusing on. And what was your game plan after that? So you got the mindset down, you read the books you needed to, you started talking to other investors within the industry. What was the next step? Was it like finding a real estate market? Like where are you going from here?
Yeah. So it's the next step. Once we kind of started getting into the actual fundamentals of actual real estate investing, and we had kind of gone through the mindset stuff, it was pick a strategy, pick an investing strategy. And what seemed to make the most sense for me, because I had no active income at the time, was to start looking at wholesaling, because you can't have a real estate deal without the deal. And finding off-market properties is the best place to look for good deals. I mean, yes, there are deals out there on the MLS. You can find deals anywhere. But, if you're looking to consistently find undervalued properties, looking off market is arguably the place to do it, right? And so while I was kind of going into that strategy, that wasn't what I really wanted to do at first, but I understood the importance of it. And, because I had no sales background. So I was like, wholesaling is essentially a sales job. And I have no experience with sales. I don't pitch to people. I don't do that, but this is a skill that I can learn. And so I'm going to start doing this because this is what's going to make me a better investor in the long term. And so I started learning how to wholesale deals and how to find leads off market, how to negotiate with sellers, and how to close deals basically. So that's sort of what the next steps were from there. I started doing, first thing I did was I drove up to Sudbury 4 hours and did driving for dollars for, the whole 3 days. I just drove every neighborhood. I know that city inside and out at this point because I was, dropping off mailers in houses that were completely falling apart. I had tenants running out, screaming at me, telling me to get off their property. And it was not a fun experience, but I'm glad I did it because I know what it's like now, but it's what you have to do when you're starting out and if you don't have a lot of capital and, you want to get into real estate, this is a great way to do it, is find deals and provide value for other investors and make some cash in the meantime,
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a fantastic strategy to get started off. And yeah, I mean, you hustled. You went 4 hours up north. Why did you start with Sudbury when you were wholesaling? Why not just do something local?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of skipped over that whole thing. So when I was trying to decide on what market to invest in, I initially started looking in Guelph and KWC, and I was looking at Windsor at first. I was looking at Hamilton. I was looking at St. Catharines, Niagara. I was kind of all over the place. And one of the big things having a coach help me with was focusing on just one market. It wasn't like there's no right answer for what market to start in, because if you're an expert in that market, you're going to do well. What you really need to do is just pick one and focus on becoming an expert there and building power teams there. And so when I was analyzing markets and, Sudbury has strong fundamentals. And one of the biggest things for me was low vacancy and the price to rent ratio was so much better than any of the other markets I was looking in. And this was back in January before it kind of skyrocketed. But yeah, so I just was like, oh my God, like I'm looking at my house that I'm renting right now is probably worth $1.4 million. And I'm paying between three guys, it's $3,400 a month in rent. Whereas in Sudbury, I could get a property for less than $200K and it's going to rent for over $2,000 a month. Like it's insane to me. That's like, why would I ever buy a property in Toronto as an investment if I could do that there, And so I went the cash flow route, and that's why I decided to invest in Sudbury. And I was 4 hours away, but based on how much capital I had, it just made more sense for me.
I think people are like coming around and they're understanding it now, right? But like when I first got started in Windsor, I was kind of like, why the heck are people paying like $1,800 for like a single family house out in Windsor when like a 3-bedroom house in Toronto, like the main floor, I guess, but still like that only goes for like $2,000, right? So it all comes down to like, what's the affordability? And for better or for worse, for like most of our tenants are all kind of like minimum wage earners, or like there's a certain like tenant profile that's associated with those tenants, right? And the way the Liberal government, I guess back in 2015 or 16 or whatever that year was, when they increased minimum wages to $15 an hour, that happens all across Ontario, right? So minimum wage earners earn the exact same thing regardless of where they are in Ontario. And as a result, what you find is that rent prices plus or minus like $200 maybe for like most cities is all going to be relatively the same, but these purchase prices are completely different, right? So that seems like a good realization that you had there. So once you decided on Sudbury, you went out there, you were driving for dollars.
I don't think we ever mentioned what driving for dollars is. I don't, in any of our ever podcasts, most wholesalers are just doing flyers. Can we elaborate on what driving for dollars is and what was the method to get deals that way?
Yeah, for sure. So driving for dollars is pretty much what it sounds like. You're literally driving every street in a neighborhood. You basically just pick a neighborhood and then you literally drive in your car and look for houses that are potentially problem houses or distressed, I guess is the right term to use. So what I would look for are things like, overgrown landscaping, if the aluminum work, if the eaves troughs are falling off, if the windows are broken, if the windows are boarded up, if it looks like the door's been kicked in, if there's spray paint on the side of the house, if there's like a ton of junk in the front yard, if there's broken cars in the front yard. I would kind of have a point system there, and every single one of those things is a point. And I would basically rate houses on, A, B, C, A being like 10 points, which is like absolute crack house, completely falling apart. That's what I'm trying to target there. And then kind of go down from there to the B properties that are like, the doors, it needs work. The eaves troughs are falling off, but not crazy, or there's garbage in the front lawn kind of thing. And then to the C properties. And then what I would do is I would write down all these properties and I would keep a list and write down all the addresses. And then when I got home, I would pretty much send direct mail to these houses as opposed to doing a mailer campaign. It was like I would go to Canada Post and buy 500 stamps and send out 500 letters to each house individually in an envelope that's handwritten to those houses.
So a lot more targeted, which is great, right? So your response rate, your success rate is going to be higher than a mailer campaign. And it's going to be ultimately all in all cheaper, but a lot more work intensive, right? But you were unemployed at that time. So you were trading in that sweat equity, right? And hustle to learn these skill sets.
Exactly. It's a sniper approach, whereas the mailer campaigns, or when you just spray 5,000 mailers in a neighborhood, is more of a shotgun approach, right? You're just spraying every house in the neighborhood, knowing that like 99% of those people are not even going to bat an eye at that.
Yeah. And how did that wholesaling business go? I know that, I guess we can get into an example. You wholesaled myself a deal, or we tried to partner up and wholesale a deal. That wasn't successful. So Waylon and I just bought it from you. Was there any other success, or we can just dive into that example if you'd like?
Yeah. Why don't we talk about that one? That was a Sturgeon Falls deal, right? That was a pretty good one, I thought, but we weren't able to move it. That deal actually came from a Kijiji ad. That wasn't even a mailer. So, I mean, I learned a lot going through that process. That was actually my first deal. I got a message on Kijiji. Every morning I would post an ad on Kijiji just saying, wanted house for sale by owner. And one that said wanted duplex, triplex, fourplex. And, I got a message from the seller, and he said, "Hey, I'm looking to sell ASAP," basically. And I said, "All right, I'll meet you up there and then we can talk about it." And kind of went through and negotiated in person and tried to really understand the reason and the motivation behind why he was selling. And basically, when we got down to it, he traveled for work a lot. He picked up this property in 2018 as an investment, but he was kind of in over his head. And I mean, you saw the property, Austin. It was in rough shape.
Yeah.
The front unit was tenanted. The back unit was vacant. Thank God, because I think whatever tenants were in there would not have been fun to deal with. But I mean, it was a big property and big lot in a little town called Sturgeon Falls, which is like half an hour from North Bay. It's right in between Sudbury and North Bay, like an hour from Sudbury, half an hour from North Bay. And he wasn't really giving me much at first, but I kind of kept digging in and trying to figure out exactly why he was selling it. And it just seemed like, you know, the state of it, he wanted to renovate it, but it needed way too much money, and he could not afford the renovations to keep it running. I mean, he gave me the expenses, and his gas bill was over $400 a month. And I was like, how is that even possible? You're paying over $400 a month in gas. I can let you get into why that was the case, but like,
what happened? How do you have a $400 gas bill?
Yeah, I think the furnace is just very old, and one of the tenants control it. Like, there's only one thermostat, and she has full control of it, and she can do whatever she wants. And I guess she just blasts it high, right? So like, yeah.
there was also no insulation,
and there's no insulation as well. Yeah, that too.
Yeah, it was brutal. But anyways, we worked it out, negotiated a price. I locked it up for $147.
Which is mind you, that's the same price he paid for it in 2018.
Exact same price he paid for it in 2018. Yeah, exactly. So I locked that up for $147. And when I was running the numbers and looking at the comps, I was like, this should be easily $160. And so I was going to try and wholesale it myself, but I just didn't have a big buyer's list, and I didn't really want to risk it. I thought about closing on it myself at first, but I just thought, you know what, it'd be better if I can just partner up and, you know, get a higher fee and split it with Austin and Waylon. And one of the biggest things from the start in terms of going back to the whole mindset thing is I really wanted to be able to give value. And I, you know, both my and Austin, you guys have given me so much value. So one of the biggest things that I wanted to be able to do was, hey, bring you a deal. And it's like, hey, you can make money off this too, and we can partner up. And I'm happy, you know, I'd rather have half a watermelon than a full grape. You know what I mean? So I figured I'd be able to make more money this way. Not only that is I'd be able to bring you an opportunity, And that's kind of why I decided to partner up with you on this. And you had so much more expertise than me. So I just figured it makes sense, right?
Yeah, and we had faith in that deal, right? For whatever reason, it didn't wholesale at the price that we're looking at. A lot of the investors thought it was too much work. So Waylon and I just paid you a fee and bought it from you. And then we closed it on ourselves. So we're getting that. We already got that appraised. We're getting the appraiser report tomorrow.
I just went back and looked at my text history with Adam because I was like, how the heck did I start like talking to Adam and like what was their backstory there? And it was literally like we hopped on a call once randomly. And then I looked at like the chat after that, like, and it's essentially like Adam just like sent me a deal, like out of the blue. It was something that you had in Triplex, like it was on market, but like you knew the seller was just distressed, and you were just like, hey man, like not looking for anything out of this, but like I can introduce you to the realtor if you want, and like here's all the details on the property. You just sent me like full details on it. I was like, this guy's pretty legit.
That's when you that's when you're like, man, like obviously you're gonna spend time with this guy because like he's putting in the work. He's adding value to you. So it's like, okay, like, of course, like he doesn't have to do any of these things, right? So like you feel the need or not the need, you want to help back.
Yeah. So for anyone that's, I guess, I mean, don't start just like sending like random people random deals, but like the way Adam did it, like you're actually just genuinely trying to provide value, right? Like I think that's a great way for like anyone that, you know, wants to change your network, wants to get in with like other people that are doing bigger things that you want, right? If it's a deal that you can't close, like you just like you said, you give like Austin them and you were like, hey, like, you know, why don't we like partner up on this or whatever it is, right? Like providing value one way or another. So,
exactly.
So that was the Sturgeon Falls one. So what happened after that one? So you guys tried wholesaling that. It was a bigger project for a lot of investors. I think I remember this deal. I think at that point, like people were still kind of like, okay, Sudbury's fine, but like
Sturgeon Falls is a smaller market. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not willing to touch like these smaller markets. But I think in today's world, like people would be like, yeah, like Sturgeon Falls, like right there between Sudbury and North Bay. Like,
and the numbers made sense. Ultimately, that's what it comes to. It's a burr property. Me and Waylon are burring it. But I guess we'll skim over because we want to get into your journey a bit more, Adam. So you wholesaled that deal, and where do we go from here? You made a couple thousand off of that, and were you sending out millers with it, or are you going to spend that on buying your first property, which we'll get into as well?
Yeah, so that just kind of went towards recouping some of my marketing costs, and you know, obviously investing. Put down an investment for the coaching as well. So I just kind of put that all into a pot. I have a bank account just completely separate for wholesaling and real estate investing, not attached to any property or anything like that. But from there, I just kind of kept looking for the next deal. And what I really wanted to find was I wanted to find a buy and hold deal for myself, but I wanted to find something in a good neighborhood. And so looking in Sudbury, I'm sure a lot of your investors or a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with, a lot of the neighborhoods in Sudbury, but for any listeners who aren't, I was really looking in the new Sudbury neighborhood and the Minnow Lake neighborhood, because those are kind of like B+ neighborhoods. You know, still good to find deals, but good quality tenants. And I've heard so many horror stories about people investing and buying in bad neighborhoods, and just you're adding risk when you buy in a bad neighborhood. And the reason I decided to start investing in real estate was to mitigate the risk of my investments. So I was really trying to find a deal in New Sudbury or Minnow Lake, essentially, or the South End. So I kind of focused full on that and kept doing the mailer campaigns. I had one deal that I actually got through a mailer that I ended up walking away from because I was too conservative on the numbers. And that deal I had locked up for 273. And I was just like, I don't know if the returns are good enough.
That's a common beginner mistake. And I think even Mayu and I have definitely done this before in some past deals, is being overly conservative and walking away. But you need to realize that was your worst case, right? Like, because when we analyze deals, it's typically worst case, and most cases it pans out better than that.
Yeah, so I was way too conservative on my numbers. I walked away from it. Someone else swooped in and locked it up off market. And it's actually on the MLS as a flip right now. It has a conditional offer. I'm not sure what it's sold for, but I think it's going to hurt my soul when I find out.
That happens, man.
Hindsight's always 2020, right? Like when you look back and you're like, oh, like based on what I see on the market today, like that would have been a great deal to buy. And there's so many of those, and like the number of deals that are like that isn't going to decrease. It's just going to keep getting more and more, right? But that's cool, man. So that was a triplex, right? At 270. I think you told me about this one. Was it a triplex?
Yeah. It was.
Oh, good.
I know. I should have bought it, but it's okay. Live and learn.
Yeah.
Deals come and go. There's gonna be more, right?
Exactly, right? Like I love that mindset. Deals do come and go, and there'll always be more. So tell us what happened then. So you're looking for your search, you're analyzing your numbers. How many deals did you analyze before you got into your first property? And we'll talk and then lead into why you decided to buy your first property.
Yeah, so I've analyzed over 100 deals at this point. I kind of stopped counting. It would just be like every more anytime I get a lead from a seller, analyze, right? And then also I spent time analyzing deals on the MLS just to see what was going on in the market, what things are selling for. And I want to give a quick shout out to my realtor up in Sudbury, Cassandra Beach. She has been like my number one power team member up there. Like there's no way I would have any idea what was going on in the market without her. So if any investors are looking to connect with an investor oriented realtor, she's a rock star out there and she's helped me greatly. But I guess where I went from there is I actually did lock up a deal for myself back in May. And it's not a home run deal, but after I learned from that one that I walked away from, I was like, I was way too conservative and I burned myself because I had that locked up at 273 and then an identical house sold for 390, like right down the street 4 days later. I didn't want to make that mistake again. So this lead I actually got handed to me from another student in Corey's coaching program, Eric Kaloum. He's been, him and I, he lives in Azildo, which is like probably like 15 minutes from Sudbury. And him and I would text pretty much every day. We would do our Kijiji ads every day. And just about every time we would get a lead from Kijiji, one of us texts each other and be like, did Randy text you or did Joe text you? And we'd be like, oh yeah, he's just trying to get market value kind of thing. So we were able to see the tire kickers pretty quickly. And, when you're generating leads wholesaling, 9 times out of 10, when you get a lead, it's not a motivated seller and you're not going to be able to make a deal work. So you don't want to spend too much time on that, which is something that I learned too early on is I would just spend an hour on the phone with unmotivated sellers and just be wasting my time. But just because I'd be like, oh, yeah, maybe I can make a deal happen out of this. But once you start doing it, you sort of learn how to vet them. And you can still monetize those deals into, providing value for other people. Like one of the things I always do whenever I get an unmotivated seller is I just try to find out, why don't you want to sell in the market? Okay, but you want full market value for your property? Well, you should really think about listing this on the MLS because you're going to get more money on the MLS. And then I just try to convince them to sell with my realtor. So that's one way to kind of flip those leads into a means of providing value for someone else, basically. And when I do that, then I feel better about asking Cassandra for comp because she's just giving for me and not expecting anything in return. So I always try to provide value especially if I'm receiving value. But yeah, so this deal is a single family. The seller actually reached out to Eric. I believe it was through his Kijiji ad of his. But he's not interested. He's got a few more properties under his belt than I do. And he's not interested in single families. He's looking for multis. So he just said, hey man, I know you're looking in New Sudbury. This guy's looking to sell. Here's his info. He'd be down to have a chat. And I was like, thank you, man. Appreciate it. Absolutely. And I actually ended up locking that deal up remote. I was in California for work and I just negotiated everything over the phone with him and locked in a price. And so we can get into the numbers too if you want. Locked it up. It's a single family. Locked it up at $230K. Market value is around 270, and ARV is going to be around conservatively 320 after renos. So that's.
And how much are you what's the reno? What's that scope of work look like? How much is it going to?
So here's where I am finding a little bit of challenges here because I'm going through that right now. So it has not been completed by any means. So maybe I shouldn't be talking about the numbers too much on this deal. But I had budgeted initially.
320 is pretty low for an ARV in New Sudbury, isn't it? Are you being overly conservative?
It's a semi. So, and the footprint's a little bit small. I mean, I have comps that are at 350, but I'm trying not to be too optimistic. I'm trying to be more conservative.
Yeah.
And so worst case scenario. But there are properties similar selling for 270 without renos, and the newly renovated ones are selling anywhere between 300 to 350. So, But I had budgeted $20K for renos because it was just going to be a lipstick renovation. But there were a couple snags we ran into. I didn't walk the property after when I locked it up, and so I had some boots on the ground up there that walked it for me. And the bedrooms are really small. Like it's about an 800 square footprint. It's a 3-bed, 1-bath. Yeah. And upstairs is just like 2 tiny bedrooms and 1 normal sized bedroom. So that's not ideal. There's not a lot of living space, so not great for like a family with kids that are older than toddlers, really. But that was one thing that we ran into. And the bathroom, which I thought was just going to be a quick cosmetic reno, just paint and put some new fixtures on. It pretty much needed to be gutted. Like there was a leak and there's caulking all over the bathtub. So we're just pretty much going to tear out the bathtub, tear everything out and redo it all. And then we're redoing the kitchen completely. That's about $8,000 for the bathroom. I don't know if I need to get into all the renovations, but it needs a lot more work than I initially thought. And it has aluminum wiring as well that I'm trying to make sure that I don't get into any troubles with, having to replace that right now.
As long as it's up to code ultimately, right? Like
exactly.
Explore pigtailing, which I think I told you about, which is a much cheaper alternative. You just do that in all the outlets than like physically stripping it all and replacing it. But that's awesome, man. So one thing that I can take away here, Adam, is that you're a very decisive person. I think one of the issues with anyone looking to get into entrepreneurship or investments in general is that they're not decisive. They do all of the research they want. And it's like also another word for taking action. But I think decisive is a better descriptive of it. Is that once you hear something and it makes some sort of sense to you, you're decisive. You decisively say, okay, I am going to do this, rather than pander and think like, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? Right? You make decisions, and that's like these series of decisions ultimately what's going to move you forward. And it's also ultimately what's going to get you to obstacles. But then you make more decisions to overcome those obstacles, right? So you have a phenomenal story there, and you should be really proud of yourself on what you've accomplished so far.
I was just going to add on to the entrepreneurship bit. I think it's all just coming down to like kind of leaps of faith, right? Like, so you made a leap of faith to get into real estate. You made a leap of faith to get into coaching. You made a leap of faith on your wholesale deal. The one time that you were a little bit like apprehensive and like overly cautious, sure, you got burned, right? But you took that as a learning lesson. Now you're taking a leap of faith. And like, I just quickly ran your numbers, like not factoring like holding costs and stuff like that. But you're pretty close to like a full burr. Like maybe you leave like a couple, like $5,000-$10,000 in like renovations. Like no one, like, that's a really good deal.
5 to 10K, like even 20K conservatively is not bad. Like if it's like, oh, okay, there's a 70% chance it's going to be less than 20K, but like if it's 20K, that's not bad. That's how you should run your numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And the only other route that you could do if you didn't want to have a 20K, do you want to put like 20% down and have a 60K down payment? No, right? So your overall, like your returns are going to be much more amplified anyways, right? So I think it's a pretty solid deal. And honestly, that's all within like, what is that? Like 4 months of like really like being like hardcore into real estate, like 5 months, I guess, if you're in May, right? So that's pretty dope, man. So let's talk about this deal. Cause I know you said like the renovation side, like there's some things that didn't pop up that popped up that you didn't really expect. Are you working now? Like, how does that work on the financing side? Like, how are you like raising the capital for this? Like, what are you doing? Like, and you're probably still figuring it out because it hasn't closed yet, but what's your game plan?
No, so I feel bad because I kind of threw my stepmom under the bus here when she laughed at me, but she's been super supportive for me. So I'm really grateful to have that to fall back on. She's got a government job. She's super risk averse. They don't have any other debt aside from their house. And she agreed to co-sign on a mortgage with me. So because I'm self-employed, doesn't matter how much income I've earned. Lenders know what's happened to the music industry. The second I tell them I work in the live music industry, they're not going to lend anything, right? So luckily, I have my stepmom, Heather, to thank. She was able to help me get the borrowing capacity and to secure, traditional financing with Scotia. And so I've already got the mortgages all sorted out. We've got a 2.1% interest rate, 30-year amortization. And so at the purchase price, until we refinance, it's going to be a mortgage payment of $671 per month. So I mean, before refi, it's going to cash flow like crazy. But then obviously after, you want to refi so you can pull that capital out, right? So that's kind of where we're at with the numbers there. And then in terms of, sorry, what was the question before?
No, just like other hurdles that like you're facing now. So it sounds like you've got the mortgage side figured out. Are you using your own capital or are you raising capital?
Yeah, I'm funding it myself. I had quite a bit of capital saved up that was still sitting in the stock market that I'm pulling out and liquidating and putting towards this. I've also opened up a couple line of credits that I'm going to use as kind of contingencies for renovations. I think I said before I had budgeted 20K for renos. I'm already getting into it, looking closer to 40K right now. So just based on that alone, like that's going to eat into the returns a little bit. But I mean, it's going to be worth it in the long term rather than not doing that stuff. You know, I was looking at framing a bedroom in the basement. I think ultimately decided against it, but we're going to see where we're at once we kind of get the bathroom and the kitchen done and kind of go from there. But obviously trying to renovate strategically as possible, right? It's a rental. So one of my biggest challenges right now is making sure that I don't over renovate and go too hard on things that are not going to generate a return for me.
Usually I think like when it's a 3-bedroom house, like I usually find that the incremental rent that a 4-bedroom generates, like unless it's going to help your BRRRR, not really that significant, right? So
no, it's not worth it. At the end of the day, the amount of money it's going to cost to do that is not going to generate a return that merits it. But just to go back to kind of what Austin said about you saying I'm super decisive, I've always considered myself a pretty indecisive person, honestly. And I think, you know, a lot of the reason that people are indecisive about taking action is because they're afraid, and they're afraid to fail. And they're afraid, like, what if I lose all my money? You know, that was one of the first, like when I started telling my friends I was going to invest in real estate and even investing in coaching, they're like, man, you're going to get rinsed. Like, these guys are just scammers. Like, you're going to lose all your money. And it's like, I mean, if you think that way, then you're never going to take action and you're never going to move forward. The way that I look at it now is that, yeah, I'm putting my money into this now, but if I fail and if I lose a bunch of money, at least I'll learn from it. And, you know, that failure is just going to be a learning experience to get me one step closer to a huge success, you know? And so that's kind of the way that I looked at it. And I think that's what made me force myself to be more decisive and just make decisions, because I feel like I spent too much time waiting on the sidelines already and I need to get in. And that's sort of why I took action.
All right, Adam, that's you've had a good amount of success to date where you are. I guess you're halfway through like your 6 months into the year at this point, and I'm sure the next 6 months, it's interesting that growth kind of like exponentially takes off, right? And so that leads us into our kind of, I don't even know what we call it anymore, rapid round kind of 3 questions that we like to ask our guests at the end. So like, Adam, what's your goals in real estate 5 years from now? I'm going to change it up a little bit, but it's just more so like, if you were to break it down into what you want to be doing a year, 3 years, like 5 years down the road, like what kind of trajectory are you setting up for yourself, or do you want for yourself?
Yeah. So my plan right now is to be completely honest with you, I do really like my job, and with the world starting to open up again, I'm actually heading out on tour next week. So I'm going to be gone on tour for the next 2 months. So I'm still going to be, managing or overseeing the renovations and the leasing of the property from afar. But I'm going to be working on finding some more deals in Sudbury. And then when I get back, I will have a lot of time off. So I want to hit the ground running with wholesaling a bit harder and start pivoting into the GTA markets more. I think for myself, I'm going to continue actively buying in Sudbury. I want to get into bigger multifamily units. But about 5 years from now, I'd like to see myself pivoting into investing in the GTA. And I feel like a great gateway into that is to continue buying for myself in Sudbury and start wholesaling closer to home, where I can just drive within an hour to negotiate deals, because I find it's just so much more effective negotiating in person. So sorry, I'm getting a little bit off topic again, but yeah, 5 years from now, I want to be investing in the GTA and into bigger multifamily units. I think I see myself, I want to be able to buy a single family home for myself in Toronto as a primary res with a backyard and a hot tub. But that's pretty much where I'm looking to be in 5 years.
Second question here is that if you won $10 million and you had 7 days to spend it and you cannot spend it all on real estate, what would you spend it on?
You can spend some of it on real estate though, right?
Of course, yeah. Real estate show, so we have to.
I'd probably put at least half of it into real estate. I'd probably one of the big things I'd like to do is retire my parents. They work so hard, and I know that they're not living financially free lives right now, and I know that's something that I would like to be able to do because they've provided so much for me, and it's like to be able to give back to them. But yeah, 7 days to spend 10 mil, that's a short amount of time to spend a lot of money. So I'd probably have to plan a sick golf trip with my boys around the world. I think that'd be probably the number one thing. Probably just take a couple $100,000 and go all out, do a sick golf trip for like a month around the world. That'd probably be where I put the money. I'd probably hire a personal chef, probably. Yeah, I don't know. Some of the luxuries, upgrade my lifestyle a little bit, maybe buy a cabin out in BC, I don't know.
That millionaire lifestyle. MTV
exactly,
lifestyle.
Exactly. Yeah, man.
Well, man. So if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would you choose and why?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think if you had asked me that like 5 years ago, I would have a very different answer for you. But I think I've kind of actually met a lot of the people I looked up to when I was younger. And honestly, sometimes when you meet your heroes, it's not what you would have thought it was. But I think if I could have dinner with one person dead or alive, it would actually be if I could go back in time to like 1950, I would have a conversation with my grandpa when he was my age and just try to tell him to not be such a workaholic. Because I think my grandpa, I didn't really know him that well. He died when I was 4. And, I had a conversation with my grandma where she just said, I wish that I knew him better because he was always at work. And I think that I've always been a bit of a workaholic myself. And I definitely get that from my dad, who I know got that from my grandpa, because my grandpa was just working all the time, trying to provide for his family. But when he did that, he didn't have time to spend with them. And, when you break it down, time is the most finite asset of all. It's money is unlimited, but you only have a certain amount of time. And I think he spent too much time working. He didn't really value his family enough, even though his heart was in the right place. I would probably try and go back in time and have a conversation with him about that and hopefully talk some sense into him. But yeah, sorry, it's a little bit
No, I think that's that's a very honest answer. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And that's definitely true, right? Like, we all do real estate to get our time back, and then we get carried away, like Mayu and myself, where we end up spending more time than needed. But ultimately, that's all, again, to do things, to work hard now so that in the future we don't need to work as hard, right? And a lot of people might lose focus of that as they get further along in their journey. But you have a strong anchored why, so that's obviously going to guide you to the right place. Anyways, Adam, really appreciate you joining on in today's podcast, sharing your journey thus far. And man, like, you're doing a lot of things right now. And I know it sometimes doesn't always feel that way when you're going through the journey, but like I'm sure Mayu and I can both attest, like, being in that path, you're doing a lot of the right things that you need to be far into investing. So huge round of applause to you. If any other people want to reach out to you, connect with you, learn more about your journey, or just shoot the shit, how can they do so?
Yeah, so I think the best way to reach me would be just follow my Instagram. It's at Shoji Properties. It's SHOJI Properties. I'm always posting on there. I'm always happy to connect with people. If you just want to chat or if you have any questions, shoot me a DM. I'm always happy to chat about real estate. And yeah, you can follow my journey. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. And guys, if you enjoyed this podcast episode, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, do whatever you can to support the podcast. All of Adam's information is going to be in the show notes below. And until next time, everyone, invest smarter and live better. Take care.